Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in this morning. 98.3 The Vibe Special Edition I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. And we want to thank you all for tuning in again. For those of you who are joining us by YouTube, we want to tell you to get out there and subscribe. For those of you joining us by the morning 98.3 The Vibe Special Edition, we want to tell you to tune in by going to YouTube and looking up the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. And we would like you to look at the actual physical views and get involved and subscribe. For those of you out there that have been involved with every episode that we've been going through so far, we want to say thank you. Shouts out to Reyes Spigner. We've got Pastor Bell in the house. We've got Ken Silver, my co-host, in the house, and we're ready to rock and roll this morning. I don't know where to start, Ken.
Well, we can help you if you suddenly run out of words or anything to say.
Go ahead.
You know, if you remember our last podcast, we had Christine Branstead on here, one of Des Moines' leading attorneys, and we talked to her about the court system. And that was kind of the last segment of our Justice Injustice series. And so we thought we'd take a little time today and just recap what we've gone through the last few weeks. You know, we started with the components of the justice system, and the first one was legislation and legislators. And surprisingly enough, there's a lot of injustice related to that procedure. And there's laws that should have been made that weren't made. There are laws that we should make and didn't make, the ones that we did make that were wrong. And so we need to make sure everybody understands that we have a say in that. You know, a lot of the laws are because certain lobbyists came in there and lobbied that they wanted that law to be put into effect or they wanted that law taken out. And we as citizens need to understand that we can do that ourselves. You know, we can write, we can send letters, we can send emails.
In fact, later on today, we're going to learn. I remember that we talked about how to file a complaint when you're being attacked by police officers. Well, later on today, we're actually going to learn how you do that.
Right. And, you know, going on with the components, we talked about law enforcement and we got into that in pretty much in detail. I think our summary was that although it's not perfect, it's not really the biggest problem of injustice. The thing we got into next when we started to talk to Miss Branstead was the court system. And when we talk about the court system, we're talking about attorneys, we're talking about judges, we're talking about juries. Now, she was very helpful in explaining the difference between court-appointed attorneys and public defenders. And very frankly, she gave us a lot of confidence in both of those. And I remember one of her statements was, you're a lot better off with a public defender than you are with a bargain basement attorney.
Yeah.
So
she did.
We think, you know, if there's injustice in the courtroom, yes, there is. You know, we still don't like the idea that you may end up with a defense attorney that you've never met and you're sitting in the hallway at the courthouse 5 minutes before you go into trial and they came up with a deal for you and say, here, sign this, and we're going in, and this is your plea. And you don't really have much of a chance to think it over or talk it over with anybody. So there's some injustices going on there, we feel like. But for the most part, it looks like the attorneys are doing a decent job.
Now, Pastor Bell, I see you nodding your head over there. What do you have to say about that?
Well, you know, when Kent was alluding to how the system is set up in such a way that the injustice is already in place systemically, when you talk about a jury of your peers, when you're selecting the jury, the pool of people are in no ways, most of the time, peers of the individuals who are going to end up before the court. So correct. It's already contaminated. And when you talk about people sitting out in the lobby and making deals, well, where's the collaboration with the client? The client does not normally understand the system and is depending on this so-called knowledgeable individual to seek out their best interests. It normally does not happen. It just does not happen.
I think that it's ridiculous when you look at the fact that the rules, okay, these laws, jury instructions, it specifically states, it's even a constitutional right. I can't quote it right now, but I know that it even quotes, you have to have a jury of your peers. Now, what happens if you get all white people and you're a black man on trial?
Well, that's the problem with your lawyer, okay? The lawyers are able to interview all these potential jurors, and they have a right to dismiss certain ones. So there should be a pretty selective group. The problem is finding those people to serve on juries.
Well, let me just cut in there real quickly because, through personal experience, I've actually went through jury trial, where there were no blacks out there. We pulled, we dismissed, and there were none.
Right.
So there were none in sight, and this was when I actually had my first encounter with a jury. I didn't think that, I would run into this problem. Most people that go to trial, a lot of times it's their first time. They don't know what to expect. They know what the rules say, but they don't know if, this is just something that's normal or not.
Well, let me comment on something first of all. The jury pool is basically consists of registered voters. Okay. Why are you working so diligently recently down in the parks to get people to vote? Because historically, a lot of black people have not registered to vote.
True.
Okay.
That's fact.
If you don't register to vote, you're not going to put your name in the hat. Nobody can draw it. So that's problem number one. Problem number
Ladies
two.
and gentlemen, and with that problem, I want to tell you to get out there and vote. This is Robert Pate with the I.M.A.G.E program, Ken Silver and Pastor Bell, and we want to tell you, get out there and vote. If you don't vote, don't complain. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Are we done?
We're done.
Okay.
That was a commercial right there.
The other aspect of what you're saying is nobody knows what they're doing when they go to a courtroom. That's why we hire lawyers.
Right.
Okay. So we have to depend on the lawyer we hire. We have to depend on a public defender or a court-appointed attorney. And after talking to Christine, it appears as if most of the time those people are doing a good job. Okay. If we take that premise, then we move on to judges. Now, I have not heard any complaints about judges in Iowa. For the most part, I think everybody's happy with them. I don't understand why, because we elect them and we have no idea what their qualifications are. We just go down there and check it.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the problem is that, again, you don't hear people complaining about the judges except for the ones that are being affected by it. Most of the ones that are being affected by it are the inmates or the guys coming out of prison. Again, after they've lost their appeals through the Supreme Court, maybe through all these different appeals that have been exhausted, they're wore out. Once they get out into the free world, they don't even really want to get involved with any of that. They're just happy to enjoy their freedom, enjoy the fresh air. And instead of getting out there filing complaints or following up or getting lawyers involved and pursuing it when you get out, unfortunately, it just goes untalked about. And that's why we're here today.
Well, I think there's a lot of misconception. First of all, if you're convicted of a crime and you're not happy about it, the only basis for an appeal is if there was mishandling of the evidence or your lawyer didn't do the right thing. Okay, now you've got that appeal. After that, the basis for the appeal is, did the judge misapply the law? Okay, so you've got two reasons for appeal. And a lot of the times, people go through the process and they say, well, my lawyer didn't handle it right, the evidence wasn't handled right, and so on. And that goes to an appeal court, and they say, well, we've reviewed all this, and it really was handled properly. You have no basis for an appeal. the other time is that you go back and you say, well, the judge accused me and convicted me of this crime, but he misapplied the law. So now you've got another appeal to the court system. But, you know, the thing that bothers me most, I wish we had a way for people to know the qualifications of the people we're electing for judges. And, you know, we see posters all over town about people running for different public offices. I've never seen a poster for a judge.
Pastor Bell, what do you think? And first of all, Pastor Bell, I want to tell you, I really appreciate you coming in here today, sacrificing your time. We all know that your father has passed away, and condolences to your family.
Thank you.
To all your kids, the grandkids, and all the survivors. I know that your family was has been heavily and still are involved in pastoring and shepherding and ministry. And so we appreciate that addition that you bring. That is special addition that you bring to our show. So we appreciate your time and thank you for being here.
Certainly. I would say my parents always told me that all people have intrinsic value and worth and should be treated as such. Any judge that's getting ready to make a decision about somebody's future should realize that in some ways he's connected to that person because he's part of God's creation. And if we had more people who thought about that, I'm going to affect someone's future who's probably not only somebody's child, may have children, all these different things. And so the challenge is to find people who are just, because justice means to treat someone properly.
Yes.
So you have to think about them in a certain way in order to treat them properly.
Yes.
Unfortunately, some of that depends on the way the wind's blowing with our government.
Yeah.
A few years ago, we had that tough on drug type of thing.
Yeah.
And the judges were pretty much mandated, send them away for as long as you can.
Right.
If you look today, I think you'll find the attitude is a lot different. And it's like you're talking about, the judges are taking a look at the person themselves. What can we do to help them? How can we rehabilitate or give them treatment instead of just, continuing to beat them down. So I'm glad that's changed.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for tuning in. We got to go to a break right now. We are about out of time. We'll be back. Don't you change that dial. You're tuned into 98.3 The Vibe, special edition. We've got Pastor Bell in the house with us. We've got Ken Silver in the house with us. And we are talking some good talk. We'll be back after these messages. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the house, and you are locked and loaded into nothing but the lovely love of the Image Show. And so we're talking about all this stuff, all this injustice. I mean, it's enough to make a person's mind just go crazy. Ken, I want to talk a little bit more now about, how can we be a part of this solution? Some recommendations for improvement.
Well, I'm going to jump in here and talk, but Pastor Bell knows a lot more than I do about this whole thing.
Well, Pastor Bell knows a lot.
Well, yeah, let him talk.
Well, first of all,
as we discovered early on in our series, one of the problems we have is that we don't have enough counselors in the prisons. And that leads to a couple different problems. Number one, the inmate doesn't get the required treatment that they need. Number two, when you go in front of the parole board, the parole board doesn't get to hear enough good information or real information about you because your counselor is supposed to do the recommendation and they may not know you very well. The third thing is that without good counseling while you're inside the prison, you may not get the tools you need or the information you need for successful reentry when you get out. So we think there's a real need to get more and better qualified counselors in the prisons. I forget the exact number, but didn't we have like one counselor per 100 people? Was that the ratio?
Yeah, it was something like that. I think that there was, it was a proven fact that, again, I know from experience as well that, there's about 100 inmates per one counselor. You cannot get the equal opportunity to see your counselor. Your counselor doesn't have the relationship to build with you because they just don't have time. And there's a lot of injustice that takes place right on inside the Department of Corrections, inside the institutions as well. We haven't really touched on that, but, just to briefly talk about that, I think that there's just as much injustice inside the Department of Corrections dealing with, COs and different relations and just a bunch of garbage, a bunch of injustice the way COs treat people. A lot of that stuff doesn't go recorded. It goes under the radar because it doesn't come out. I mean, the wardens keep a lot of that stuff secret. And so, if that all falls back on the warden, it makes it seem like they're not doing their job. So it doesn't go reported.
We're going to talk about, again, we're trying to talk about recommendations for improvement. We've got some ideas on that here in a little bit too. But the other thing I'd like to talk about, and Pastor Bell alluded to that a little bit earlier, is we need more treatment instead of incarceration.
Right.
Let's get these people out of prison and into treatment centers or hospitals, what they need, Pastor.
Yep, I totally agree. I used to work for an organization called Prison Fellowship. Some people may be laughing right now thinking he's dating himself, but there was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Colson, and he went to prison for somebody years ago by the name of Richard Nixon.
Yep.
And when Chuck Colson was in prison, he knew, first of all, that he was a white-collar criminal. He knew he wasn't going to be there a long time. And so what he did was he spent his time informing the guys that were in there, if I ever get out of here, I was hoping he's going to still be alive, I will make sure that I treat people like you're treated differently. And he did. He got out. He started this organization called Prison Fellowship. I ended up working for it.
So are you saying that because he was able to experience prison and the respect that he never thought existed inside prison, because he was able to actually witness that, he made a promise to everyone that now he would treat people completely different that were in prison with the same respect with people that are in society?
He knew that he was getting a different set of treatment than those other inmates. And he knew it was based upon the fact that he walked in there with a particular status where he was protected, and it basically was set up so that he would only spend a certain amount of time and then he would go home. So he said, when I go back, I'm going to start an organization that has people go behind the walls. And he referred to the same thing that Ken did. He said they need substance abuse and life skills. We spent, I don't know how many hours a week, but I was there from 8 to 5 every morning. Then I even had a time of prayer in the morning with some of the guys that wanted to pray. 86% of those guys never recidivated because we gave them 2 years of tech support after they left the prison system. You have to build a relationship. You have to show people that you care about them and decrease the level of disrespect and give them honor, and they'll change. People cannot act the same way they did that brought them there and stay out. You gotta change while you're in.
An interesting thing, Colson became a Christian while he was in prison. That's why he had to change the attitude, and his heart changed towards the other people. And I think that's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we need more of that. It's a shame that IFI was taken out of our prisons. Yes. They did so much good. And, you'll run into guys today that'll tell you, the reason I'm here doing well in society and not backing into prison is because of IFI.
Right.
And it was a great program.
Ken, you talk about IFI, and Pastor Bell, I heard what you said. We talk about change. Nothing better than, I don't know how many of you out there have remembered Miles Monroe who passed away in
yeah.
the plane crash, the pastor.
Yeah.
That man talked about change, and it really changed my life. And I think that, it's changed a lot of other people's lives. And I don't know, that just kind of came to me when we were talking about that.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking, if we do more treatment instead of incarceration, we have fewer people in the prisons. We have less stress on the corrections officers. And you talked about that earlier, and we can get into it a little bit later, but these guys are under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And it takes a special kind of person to handle that stress. And we might as well, while we're talking about that, get into law enforcement and the stress that they're faced with. And I think, we've said all along, we think they're doing a good job, but they could be improved. And I think that the best way
most of them are doing a good job.
Well, here's the thing
not all of them.
Here's what we think we need. First of all, probably better pre-employment testing.
Yeah.
Stress testing. If you go to your doctor, you're nice and healthy. The nurse holds your hand. She puts her thumb down there and she checks your pulse. And she said, man, you're okay. But you get to be an old guy like me. And you go to the doctor, and what's he do? He wants to put you on a treadmill, and I had to rent a pair of tennis shoes just to go do this test. And they make you walk and walk and walk until you feel like you're going to pass out, and then they check your heart to see how you perform under stress. And I think that's a major problem with our law enforcement today. First of all, society has put them under a lot of stress. Everybody is watching every move you make. And you're operating under a microscope. You've got a lot of people on drugs that are just out of their mind that you're dealing with. Well, years ago, if I was a police officer 10 years ago and I'm sitting in my car, did I have to worry about somebody coming up and shooting me for no reason?
No,
there's stuff like that going on. And so those are the kinds of things we have to either sort out before we hire them, or else teach them how to handle that type of stress.
Yes.
The other thing I think we've taken a look at is more transparency in the review board.
Yes.
The first step, and I don't know if we've got a slide that we can show the different places you can talk if you've got a problem with the police, but the first step is you contact the police department.
Right.
And they have their own review board. Well, that's probably good, but it leaves suspect to the rest of us. And when they do something wrong, we don't know for sure. Did they really do a cover-up, or did they do an investigation? And, there's a lot. I give you an example. I've had run-ins with the police, too. You're not the only one. I had an accident. A guy ran into me on my motorcycle. And the policeman came and he filled out the accident report, and he filled it out incorrectly. So I called the police department. I said, hey, I need to get this changed and filled out properly for my insurance company. Well, the only person can do that is the policeman. I said, okay, can I talk to him? Well, he won't be back till Monday. So I called back Monday. Can I talk to him? He decided to take some days off. He won't be back till Wednesday. So I called back Wednesday. You know what? He decided just to take the rest of the week off. Well, to make a long story short, it was 2 weeks before I could get a hold of this guy, and he's the only one that can correct the accident report. All right? So I get a hold of him. He said, oh, don't worry about it. I already corrected it. I said, great. Can I get a copy of it? Well, you'll have to come down here and get it. I said, you can't email it or mail it. No, you have to come down and pick it up. I said, okay, I'll come down and pick it up. Oh, by the way, we're going to charge you $5 for the right accident report.
Wow.
You get the incorrect one free, but the correct one's going to cost you $5. Now, I admit this is a petty thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's stuff like that the police do that make people upset with them.
Yeah, it is.
And it just starts grinding and building up inside of you. And the next thing you know, you want to throw rocks at them and so on. So I think this transparency, and if you looked at that thing we had on the screen a little bit ago, you start out complaining to the to the police department itself, but you have other steps to go through. And the last step, if you want to push it hard enough, is the FBI.
Okay.
But the state ombudsman,
Ombudsman.
yeah, that guy.
Maybe you've run out of breath, Ken. Maybe you've spoken a little too much.
Anyway,
let's see.
That's a good one to contact too.
I think no. But realistically, as well, I think that police officers, the majority of them do their job. And when you look at police officers, the idea is that they're here in the community to serve the people. They're here to serve us. We shouldn't be scared of them when we drive down the street. We shouldn't look, but a lot of people are because of past experience, because of what they've seen on TV, in media. And I mean, this is something that still exists. I don't want anyone to get the idea that, all police officers, we're living in a perfect world. However, I think that we just need to understand that just because we see one police officer killing someone doesn't mean that they're all doing that. Or killing an innocent person, should I say.
Well, the other thing is, we're talking about justice.
Right.
We want justice for everybody.
Yes.
Okay? So I think we beat that into the ground. I want to move on to one more thing, is we want to talk about a little more diversity on the parole board, where it's top heavy with lawyers. We'd like to see people more interested in social aspects. And we think that's about the end of our recommendations. But let's take a break.
You think?
Huh?
You think?
Oh, I'm tired.
What about you, Pastor Bell? You seem like you still got a lot more in the tank.
Well, I think that one of the things that Ken said that jumped out at me was the way in which that's handled with the parole board and review boards and things of that nature. The diversity that needs to be there. I think it's in the Latino tradition where they say anything that's for us without us is against us.
Yeah.
And one of my African friends said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so what we have to understand is, at some point, we do have to have other individuals with different and varying experiences at that table when it comes to parole boards and review boards. So we're getting a well-rounded approach to serving people.
Yeah.
That has to happen.
Yeah. I agree, Pastor Bell. I agree, Ken. Of course, I'm not always going to agree with everything, because there's some things that I've actually experienced with police officers. And I know, again, we're not living in a perfect world, so nothing is 100%.
Well, wait for a couple weeks. All right?
Okay.
We're going to have a show in a couple weeks, and we're going to have some psychiatrists, psychologists on here, and talk about what type of person makes a good law enforcement officer. All right? And what types of things do they face, and how should we expect them to handle it? So,
ladies and gentlemen, for those of you tuning in by YouTube, those of you tuning in by early morning special edition on 98.3 The Vibe, we want to tell you thank you. We're going to go to a quick commercial. When we come back, we're going to wrap up a little bit more about what we're going to go into and how we've been breaking all this injustice versus justice down, jury selections, how to file that complaint against police officers if they are in your way unjustly. We're going to show you how to file the complaint. Don't change that dial. Rhea Spigner, News Channel 8. We want to say shouts out to you. We thank you. Marcus McIntosh, thank you for all that you guys do. We'll be back after these messages. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. 98.3 The Vibe Special Edition Early Morning Show, I.M.A.G.E TV Podcast. For those of you out there that would like to become sponsors, I want to encourage you to reach out. You can reach out to me by calling 515-326-5498. Robert Pate, the director of I.M.A.G.E. You can also go to our email address at rpate.image@gmail.com or rpate.image@mail.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you that when we come back, I was going to tell you how to go out there and file that complaint. For those of you who are tuned in by 98.3 The Vibe Special Edition, we want to tell you, these are some ways that you can go down there and get a complaint filed against the police officers if they are treating you unjustly. First step is to go right down to the Des Moines Police Department. If you're located in Des Moines or whatever county you're in, go to your local police department or whatever county the officer has treated you unjust. You go down there in Des Moines. Particularly, it would be at 25 East 1st Street, the Des Moines Police Department in Des Moines, Iowa, 50309, and you would ask to speak with an officer of professional standards. And at that time, you would ask for a complaint. They'll give you a complaint, you file it, turn it in, and make sure that it was filed, and then there you have it. You have filed your complaint. That's all I wanted to say, Ken. That was important, and I felt that was very much needed.
Well, and you can see the results of that complaint because they have to do an investigation and then they'll come up with the results. If you don't agree with that, there are other ways that you can follow up, as we mentioned earlier, clear to the FBI. So hopefully everybody knows that they've got that recourse. It's not something you want to use because Aunt Emma got her feelings hurt when she got stopped with no tail light. But, we want to make sure that if it is just, that we bring it to the people's attention so it can get corrected.
Yeah. So. It's good to start. Before we end, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to know about I.M.A.G.E. We've talked a lot about I.M.A.G.E., the I.M.A.G.E. program. I founded the program at North Central Correctional Facility with Ken Silver. And the program continued to snowball, and now we are out here, a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the Des Moines, Iowa community. And so we ask that if you would like to support I.M.A.G.E. again, to go to the email address at rpate.image@gmail.com or reach out to me at 515-326-5498. Again, I.M.A.G.E. stands for Inmate Movement Against Gang Evolution. And, we built this on the biblical principles, the fight against racism. We want to encourage you, if you are having any encounters with racism, please find some help. Get in touch with the I.M.A.G.E. program. Go to some local pastors in the church. And Pastor Bell, I'm sure that you know of a lot of other resources where people may be able to go to if they're out there fighting these type of evils.
Certainly.
Why don't you just quickly tell them how they can get a hold of Pastor Bell, because he's a great resource for a lot of this stuff.
I agree. Pastor Bell, why don't you go ahead and tell them?
Sure. All you have to do is come up to the John R. Grebois at 1611 11th Street, Des Moines, Iowa, 50314. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and have conversations. I am a man who's loaded with a lot of friends who do a lot of work in the city, community-based organizations, different shelters, and I even have some relationships that extend beyond that, where people will actually provide some of the services that would cost you a lot of money. You can keep some in your pocket, and we can talk about moving your life forward, and you're having some advocates that won't walk away after they have a conversation. So come see me.
Also, there are other places in the Des Moines community, such as the Evelyn K. Davis Center. Again, I.M.A.G.E. program, Inmate Movement Against Gang Evolution, the Evelyn K. Davis Center for Working Families. It stands at the top of the mountain in Iowa. When it comes to reentry, I must say there is no other center that competes with the Evelyn K. Davis Center for Working Families. So get involved, with the movements, with the programs that are going on. We talk about gangs, how to overcome the temptation of running around with the wrong crowds. I've noticed that a lot of people Pastor Bell, and you could probably speak a little bit better on this. When they've gotten out of prison, they said, look, I've got to stay away from my old crowd. A lot of times what they were saying is they had to quit the gang that they were in, or they had to, announce that they're now de-announced from the gang, or however it goes.
Right. And I think part of that is knowing that if I don't change my my environment, if I don't change the people that I hang out with, the same behaviors that I exhibited that took me to prison will also manifest again. And there's so many wonderful, brilliant people who want a better life. And there are persons out there like Bobby, like Ken Silva and myself, that if we don't have something in our wheelhouse, we know somebody who can help you. And I heard one guy say this. He said, we may not have it all together, but together we have it all.
All right.
We'll get it done.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about out of time. I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the I.M.A.G.E TV podcast. For those of you that have sacrificed your morning to get up and listen to the I.M.A.G.E show on 98.3 The Vibe Special Edition, we want to say thank you and keep up the good work. Get out there and subscribe. I mean, we're in the community. We're making a positive change. We're making sure that we're offering support. First Fridays is at the YMCA, at the Grub Y. And I mean, we're just getting a lot of momentum going, trying to change and kick the devil and stomp him under the ground. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, we want to say have a blessed week, Ken Silver and Pastor Bell. It's a wrap.